Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Susan Linder, your host of the Innovation Storytellers Show. And all I have to say is today's episode is going to be sweet. I am so thrilled to have with me today my very special guest. And maybe you've interacted with this brand before. I'm guessing probably, I don't know, 12 to 4,000 times a year. You've probably interacted with this fantastic brand. It is the Hershey Chocolate Company and all things Hershey. And that's why I'm so excited to have Charlie Chappell on, who is going to be talking to us today about all things innovation in confection, in food, in consumer areas, and just really expanding our minds about how we get our head around this. Because I think there are so many incredible lessons that we can learn from this industry, whether you are in technology, in energy, or in consumer packaged goods. We are all going to learn something today. So let me dive in and introduce you to my friend Charlie and his chocolate factory. Charlie is the Vice President of Innovation, Research, and Development at the Hershey Company for nearly 2 years, leading both commercial and technical teams to deliver winning innovation to consumers around the world. And during his tenure, he's accelerated CMG annual innovation sales by more than 40% and established technical capabilities in sweets and BFY. You're going to have to tell us what that is, Charlie.
Will do.
And built a newly integrated salty R&D team. We love the savory over here.
Yeah.
His diverse background, blending commercial acumen with technical expertise, began as an R&D product developer at Kimberly-Clark, where he earned 3 patents. His subsequent 12-year tenure at Procter Gamble in brand management and innovation saw him influencing iconic brands like Pantene, Herbal Essences, Old Spice, Gillette, and Secret, covering multiple countries, including a significant 2.5-year assignment in Geneva, which happens to be a phenomenal chocolate hub in the world today.
Yeah.
Charlie joined the Hershey Company 11 years ago in the marketing organization, where he rose to become vice president of media and analytics. His strategic vision transformed the company's media approach, shifting from a reliance on traditional TV to a strategy of mass personalization through digital media, and of course, social media as well. He's also pioneered a novel approach to media testing, utilizing agile methodologies, which, boy, if we're not knee deep in that today, I don't know who isn't.
Exactly. Yeah.
These shifts not only accelerated growth and delivered industry-leading ROIs, but also cemented Hershey's status as a leader in media among CPG companies, with Charlie emerging as a prominent thought leader in the media industry, which is why you are here today. Charlie, thank you so much for joining me.
No, it's so good to be here.
So let's get into it. How did you get into it? How did you fall into the innovation vat?
Yeah, in some ways it wasn't intentional, but kind of looking back on my career, I've realized that I've always gravitated to roles where the future wasn't defined or it
Mm.
needed to be defined. And I go all the way back. Like I started my career, I was a chemical engineer. I went into product development at Kimberly-Clark, so in a traditional R&D function, inventing things there, getting patents, doing all that. And then I discovered this world called marketing. And I was like, ooh, that looks exciting. So went and got my MBA, switched into the marketing side of things, where there still was this constant need for innovation in everything that you're doing, whether you're bringing new ideas to commercialize or innovating and launching new products. And so that was where, so while at P&G, I was doing innovation from a marketing angle, so the commercial side of it, I think sometimes I drove the R&D folks a little nutty because I wanted to know how the product worked. I wanted to get into the chemistry. I wanted to understand all of that to become a better marketer. And so really I've always enjoyed it. So even in my even at one point here, I came to Hershey, and like you said, part of my career, I went into media. I'm like, well, what does that have to do with innovation? Well, how much have think about all of us, the consumption of media of all of us has changed dramatically in the last 10 years.
Massive.
So it was basically like taking our approach to media away from traditional television into all the new forms of media that were out there. And again, it was all innovation. Here's this new thing called Facebook. Remember when that was new? How do you
Of
advertise
Facebook.
on? How do you buy media on that? How do you be effective? So it was this constant story of just innovating, going into places where the future wasn't defined. And so now I describe to people now my job, I'm basically Willy Wonka. Every
You
new
are.
product that comes from the Hershey Company touches my team at some point along the line. So it's just back to product innovation all over again.
Okay, Charlie, fess up. Do you have coworkers that are also named like Veruca? Do people also have other names in there? Charlie's a great one, but I want
Yeah,
to give some
I
of the
have to
other folks.
say, having I can play into the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory thing. I'm actually sitting in the original Hershey Chocolate Factory right now. That's where our offices are. So yeah, so I can lean into the whole Willy Wonka thing. We even, it's funny, we launched this year a new icebreakers gum called Flavor Shifters that you remember in the movie where Veronica eats it and the gum changes flavors.
Of course. It goes
And
through a three-course meal, if I remember
yeah,
correctly.
we do two flavors, and you don't turn into, I think, was it a blueberry or raspberry? Then I forget which one, but she changed and like went away. It's not that bad, but we actually introduced a flavor shifting gum where the flavor goes from a fruity flavor to a mint flavor while you chew it. So, it all comes full circle, and it just, it's confection, it's food, it's a lot of fun because it touches everybody's lives.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
So can we just talk about that for a moment? I've said many times on this show that I think people who work in the food and beverage industry are some of the most innovative folks in the innovation field because number one, you're constantly reinventing yourselves, like
Yes.
constantly creating products, extensions, and new products. You're dealing with an incredibly savvy, but also variety hungry audience
Yeah.
that craves the nostalgic traditional Hershey bar, but
Yeah.
also simultaneously wants novelty all the time. And lastly, you're dealing with a product and an audience that's completely subjective, right? I mean, 350 million mouths in America, each one with a different desire.
Yeah, no, it is both fun and a challenge at the same time. What's so much fun is that our products bring so much joy. And everyone I run into when I say what my job is, they can relate, as you said, and they have a story, their favorite product or something along those lines that they can do. And it's just fun to hear those experiences. But you're right, it is. I talk to my R&D peers in other areas where the work they're doing and the measurement of success is very objective.
Mm-hmm.
Ours is very subjective. Everyone's talking about artificial intelligence and the use of it in innovation and R&D these days. And I'm like, where's the large language model for the tongue? Where I can to
That's
really
right.
start to be able to go fast. But you're right. It's food is very personal, and you're affected as well by the culture you grow up in. And so that's what makes it fun. There's a variety of things that you can do, and there's no one product that's going to please everybody. You have to accept that. So that's why we do so much innovation across our portfolio of products every year, and it makes it a challenge, but makes it a lot of fun too.
Can you give us a just an overview, Charlie, maybe of the scope of I want to say the R&D process, but the number of products or targets that you look to hit over the course of the year?
Yeah, just to give you perspective. So, as a company, we have our main confection business that most people know. Brands like Hershey's, Reese's, Kit Kat, they're the biggest ones, but we do Cadbury. We have a bunch of smaller brands that sometimes we'll do some innovation on the chocolate side. And then on the sweet side, we have Jolly Rancher and Twizzlers. So we do a lot of innovation there. On mints and refreshments, we have icebreakers. So that kind of covers CMG, candy mint and gum, the confectionery business in the US. We also have a small but growing international business of confection as well. And then the other part, we talk about salty through acquisition. We now have Skinny Pop, Dots Pretzels, and Pirates Booty. So we're starting to do a lot of innovation there in the salty space as well. So really, from an R&D standpoint, we cover all of that in all our markets all over the world.
And how much is health and wellness, playing a role in what you're thinking about?
Yeah, no, it's playing a big role. And what we're basically doing is moving at the speed of the consumer.
Mm.
So if you look at our confectionery business, actually one of our growing businesses around is our zero sugar platform. So we have zero sugar Reese's, zero sugar Hershey's, zero sugar York, zero sugar Jolly Rancher. And in that space, what we're constantly trying to do is bring product upgrades and innovation through technology to get that product to taste as close to the real thing as you can, but then allowing consumers to balance out the trade-offs. So from that standpoint, and so you're looking at different things, whether in that case it's reduction of sugar, you can look at reductions of calories, reductions of fat, different ways to go do that. We also have a plant-based Reese's and Hershey. The plant-based Reese's is actually really good.
Milk, right? That's
Yeah,
what we're
exactly. Exactly. And I don't follow a plant-based diet. I like eating the product. A lot of times you think about that and you're coming, oh, it's not going to taste good. The Reese's actually does. So if that's what you're looking for, I highly recommend someone go and find that product and try it. And so we're doing that. But then like you go to Salty, the Skinny Pop brand was one that goes, it's very simple. It's popcorn, sunflower oil, and seasoning. And that's it. That's really all that goes into that. We have an organic line of Skinny Pop that sells in the club channel. And so there's different ways that we go in. So yeah, we're really looking at it as moving at the pace that the consumer is. And the consumer is moving into those places very different ways. And so we're always following that and trying to bring that type of innovation as well.
It's funny. My book club is meeting next week, and it's a potluck. And so even folks who aren't vegan, vegetarian necessarily, they just want a meatless night. They just want a plant-based night where they don't have to think about it. It's really nice to have something you can pick up off the shelf as opposed to having to go to tons of specialty stores or
Exactly.
search endlessly on TikTok to find a recipe for something. So let's talk a little bit about the innovations that maybe some of those really breakthrough ideas that have come out of Hershey's. And of course, on this show, we're always interested in the story that we tell around those to get other people on board. Have there been some real, of course there have. What are some of the incredible breakthrough that you've seen in your tenure, Charlie?
Yeah, I'd say one that we just launched this summer, and it was a unique both from a product and from a commercialization standpoint. So we partnered with Shaquille O'Neal to launch his own line of gummies, or as he calls them, goomies, because he grew up in Germany. He actually, yeah. So I'll get to the story, but it's called Shackalicious, and there's two items that we sell. One is a bag of sort of original traditional gummies, and then the other one are sours. But these are extra large. They're twice the size of a normal gummy to fit with his personality. And
body, his mouth must be bigger than ours.
Well, the originals are in the shape of his head. So it's his face. And that was Shaq's decision. That was his preference. He's like, I want them to be, he said, Shaq and his persona especially is very famous for being on TNT and NBA basketball pre and post game show. And he's on there with Charles Barkley and they go back and forth. And he said to us, he said, yeah, can you make it in the face of my shape? Because I want to give one to Charles Barkley and tell him to bite my head off. So
as if he's not doing that every week, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this was a fun story because we wanted, like I said, we have Jolly Rancher, which is more of a hard candy brand. We have Twizzlers, and we saw this growing gummy space. And yes, JR gummies are out there. There's Twizzlers gummies, but we saw opportunities in the space that neither one of those brands could leverage. And when we said we could start a third brand from scratch on our own, but a lot of that takes a lot of time to build up, and this space was growing fast. Could we partner with someone to get there faster and leverage sort of their equity? And you're seeing a lot of this with the influencers who are now entering the food space in all different categories. And it's not just everybody thinks of Jake Paul and Prime as sort of the lead example. But for decades, I mean, I worked in the beauty business at P&G, and you had celebrity beauty brands launching all the time.
Right.
So that was sort of the model. So we probably vetted 30 to 50 different ideas of either people or other brands to partner with. And when you do that, there's a little bit of serendipity involved. And that when we approached Shaq and his representation, it was something that was in his wheelhouse. He's in quite a lot of different businesses, so he's very seasoned in the space to how to do it. And it just became this collaborative partnership of us bringing our expertise from the product standpoint and the branding standpoint, him bringing his expertise of what he wanted this to be. And it was really sometimes with those partnerships, they can be, your partner can be very demanding, is a good way to put it. But Shaq and his team were just phenomenal in terms of how they worked with us jointly to come out with this great product that is just flying off the shelf right now. And it's so much fun. We talk about the brand being about it's the made by the biggest kid in the candy store, and that is true to his
Great
personality.
tagline. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Did you get pushback internally from having a personality driven product like with his face on the shelf? Was that a revelation or a breakthrough for Hershey?
It was somewhat new. We'd done partnerships like this before. This was one where we were really like launching a core brand about this. And so there was this consideration, but we just saw so much potential into what it could do. And it also was going to help us to launch the product quickly because he has so much recognition and he has a vested self-interest for it to be successful. So if you look online, he's talking about it all the time and pushing it through his
Oh,
social handles and things like that. And so it helped us to get awareness very quickly, probably faster than if we created our own brand from scratch.
wow. And was there any trepidation about having like that huge association?
I think that anytime you look at something like this, you have to look at both the positives and the potential downfalls for it, but the positives so outweighed anything else that we're like, okay, no, we think this is going to be big and a way to go. And so, yeah, and so far, so good. Sales are good.
Yeah, the biggest guy in the candy store. He's the
Yeah.
biggest Charlie. So fantastic. Like, so getting that through, I imagine the different pieces and the stories that you're telling internally are really beginning to broaden the idea also of thinking about celebrity collaborations and things like that around
Yeah,
confections.
I mean, you look today and across all, it doesn't matter where you are in food, you're seeing a lot of new entrants coming in because the barriers to entry are lowering. And so
Mm.
you're seeing folks, you'll see a lot of sort of whatever you want to call them, into influencers or social media personalities who are seeing this as a way to extend their own personal brands by getting into this space. And it's not just in food, it's just other things as well. And you're seeing consumers respond to it, of all ages. Like I said, this isn't completely new. It's just the tools to be able, there's new tools now, whether it is, you can get access to the manufacturing of the products of the products more easily, or just the fact that if someone has already built up a presence online, it's easy to go out and tell all your followers about it and drive awareness without having to buy any advertising. So in a way, it's sort of free. So yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that we're seeing.
And talk to us a little bit also about the decision-making process. Like as you're thinking about what's coming next at Hershey, how does it work? How do we get the thumbs up and the thumbs down on whether or not breakthrough products are gonna actually make it to our shelves?
Yeah, it really comes down to us identifying where there are opportunities, where particularly in my case, product innovation can open us up to drive growth, and particularly incremental growth. So it really starts with identifying that opportunity, starting with the consumer. Where is there an unmet or an underserved need that we can fill? Then you start to look at both sort of this we start to look at three things in terms of like, how am I going to go meet that? There's the commercialization side of it, which is, okay, well, what's the idea? What will the consumer respond to? How big could that be? Where some things along the side. So meet the consumer need. There's the industrialization side of it, which is, well, what's the product going to be? How am I going to make it? What's that going to cost? And then you have the commercialization side. Where am I going to put it on the shelf? What am I going to price it at? And what do those kind of financials look like? What kind of investment do we want to put in? So, you get this whole process by which you look at it from these three angles, building business cases to say, is this something worth pursuing or not? You're going to go test it with consumers to make sure that they're giving you validation that it is something you're going to want. For us, we sell primarily through our great retail partners. So we want to go discuss it with them because they see a lot of innovation as well. So they provide some very, very valuable feedback in the process to say, wow, this is something I've never seen before, or oh my gosh, I've seen 10 of these already in the last month. This isn't distinct. That's a really key piece that we have as well. So really it's about going through the process of from the beginning conceptual idea until we're ready to launch to say, is this ready or not? Do we keep going to the next phase, or nope, we've hit a roadblock and we just need to stop?
I'm very curious about the acquisition pipeline too, because you haven't shied away from looking at new properties and saying, wow, like maybe we could really rethink savory for us, right? It might not be a core competency necessarily, but we can find, and frankly, I think the greatest intersection of savory and sweet is the chocolate covered pretzel, frankly. So like there is no greater
We have some
collab.
of those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Don't I know it?
Yeah.
But but yeah, so talk to us a little bit about innovation through acquisition.
Yeah, that doesn't specifically come under my area of responsibility, but that
Mhm.
is definitely, I mean, anytime you're looking to grow, you have that first choice of do you build or buy? And so as we're looking at different opportunities, that's always a consideration that could come into space, come into play.
Mhm.
Obviously, when we do go that route, eventually there is, okay, what is going to be the innovation pipeline? And that gets a lot of fun. If you look at like Dots Pretzels, we're having a lot of success right now with building out the different flavor profiles there. Our most recent launch was Parmesan garlic flavor of Dots,
Mm.
which the best analogy is a Olive Garden breadstick from that standpoint, but in a pretzel, and it is just phenomenal. And it has been just flying off the shelf recently. So we've been really happy with that one. So that's fun to sort of take something that you get through an acquisition and then, okay, what can we do with it? It's already had a very strong innovation pipeline. Where do you take this from here is another fun part of the job.
So I love this concept of like thinking about, wow, I was at the Olive Garden having these fantastic breadsticks, and I'd like to continue that pleasurable experience,
Yeah.
get home, but now I want it to go crunch as
Yeah.
opposed to it to go soft, right? Like, can you just walk us through the mindset of like some of the parameters? I asked this because a girlfriend of mine, her mom was a chocolate tester.
Uh,
And we were at a brunch one day and someone brought brownies and I said, "Teach me how to eat that." And she said, you put the brownie on their mouth, and the first thing you want to get the initial taste. Like, what is that quick hit? What am I feeling? And
yeah.
so she records all of those flavors. And then it gets into the viscosity as it travels through the mouth. Is it
Mhm.
sticking to my teeth? Is it sticking to the roof of my mouth? Is it creating bitter, salty, sweet, sour sensations in the mouth as it travels to the back of my throat where I eventually swallow it? And is that pleasing to swallow? Is it goopy?
Yeah.
Does it become, and I'm like, dear Lord, like it's incredible the process. But can you just talk to us about like I once heard a food scientist say that if he could qualify the national taste of the United States, it would be crunchy. We just love to crunch, whereas other cultures, not so crunchy.
Yeah, I mean that Yuri is right. That's probably the other challenge in working in food on a global standpoint is that you have so much variety across so many different palates, and it's part of what makes the world phenomenal. It makes it so much fun to
Absolutely.
travel. I know when I go into a new country to visit throughout my career, whether it's personal or for work, I've always walked in and says, "What's the one thing I have to eat if I never come back here again?" Go
Yes, you
experience
and me
that.
both.
So.
Mine sounds like this, Charlie. Mine says, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, what should I eat today?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, no, but you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, it does come back to those same basic sort of ways that people experience food that gets into that idea of whether it is something they like and they want to eat again or not. So you're right. There is a deep science around this in food science and sensory, and we have a phenomenal team of experts who do that type of work, across everything that we do. I always say people are like, oh my gosh, that sounds like a fun job to have. I was like, yes, but you also have to eat the stuff that doesn't taste very good.
Right. Over and over and over again. Right. And like,
Yes.
I'm going to be eating brownies for the next 6 years.
Yeah. And you have to know what's the order. Like we'll have tastings of things across portfolios, and you have to be very deliberate of the order that you eat them in so that you can still experience, because certain things will gum and mints are always at the end. because of the mint and everything behind that. So yeah. So again, it's food, it's fun that people enjoy. And so I think that's why folks, it's fun to do the innovation in the space. It's fun to be involved in it. And it's really the best at the end of the day is when you're just out and you're meeting folks and they're like, wait a minute, you work for Hershey? And they're like, they tell you some experience they had with a new innovation that just went out on the market. They tell you a story behind it. And that is the most rewarding part of the job.
For sure. And I know every software engineer listening to this podcast today is crying because like those stories, those brilliant memory making stories with grandma
Yeah.
making s'mores or sitting around a campfire as a Boy Scout or what have you, right? It doesn't come with SaaS-based software
No.
in the way a Hershey
Man, I
bar does.
should I should have gone into food science after all.
Damn it.
So
Well, that's it. So what is up and coming? What can we look out for on the shelves, Charlie,
yeah.
that and the stories that we're going to be telling around those new products?
Yeah, we've got a new product that's going to be coming out here very soon if it's not already out. That is a freeze-dried Jolly Rancher.
Okay,
Okay.
why do you want a freeze-dried Jolly Rancher?
Well, because it's a very different textural eating experience. I mean, basically, like freeze drying vacuum expansion isn't necessarily a new technology to the food industry, but it hasn't been used as much in confection. And what it basically does, it pulls the moisture out and causes the product itself to expand. And for a Jolly Rancher, if you think about a traditional Jolly Rancher, hard candy, you put it in your mouth. It's, as we say, it's a long eat. You let it
Long
melt,
eat.
you get the
Okay.
flavor coming through for a long time. And that's a great experience for certain occasions. But sometimes wouldn't it great to have that in something I can just pop and eat as a different textural experience? It kind of melts in your mouth, not like a chocolate does, but you think about this. What was interesting for this is that this is a trend that started, again, you get back to social media and how anybody can upload any kind of content and you never know what's going to take off. And people started to become really interested in freeze drying different kinds of sweets. And so you watch that. Is it just a trend that's going to go boom splat, or is it something's going to last? And we made the call as like, let's get in on this and figure out how to make this. And so it's a phenomenal product that we're ready to put out there and let consumers try it. It's a very different way of eating a Jolly Rancher, very new and unique. And
Is it
I'm really
chewy? What's
excited.
the consistency?
No, it's more of a crunchy. Think of
Like a
like
dehydrated apple kind of?
yeah, oh, but much better. Much better than a dehydrated apple. Think of a little bit like if you think about like astronaut candy or things, I'm going way back in the
Oh,
day,
yeah.
like
Uh-huh.
that, but it kind of eats and there's a crunch to it.
Like
So
wafery.
yeah, but it's like if you think of like if cotton candy were harder, and so, but not like hard. You get the crunch. It kind of all dissolves and melts in your mouth, and and the big thing that we brought to it with Jolly Ranchers, you get the Jolly Rancher flavor, because that's what Jolly Rancher's known for is big, bold flavor. So anything we do, like we've launched a filled Jolly Rancher rope this year. It's like a licorice, but it's filled, but it's most but it's a very bold tasting flavor. That's what it means. So a lot of this is about how do you get in a product form, but do it unique in a way that your brand does that nobody else does. So that'll be coming to stores. If it's not already out by the time this airs, it's going to be there very soon. So we're really excited to see how that does in the market.
Well, that sounds very exciting. I'm really eager to taste it. Well, Charlie, I'm curious. You've been in this arena for quite some time.
Yeah.
What's advice as an innovator that you might give to other listeners, other fellow innovators on this call that you've learned being in this industry and from what works and what does not?
Yeah, I think a couple things is one, and none of this is really new or novel, but you have to keep reminding yourself. So you always have to be getting external inspiration from anywhere and everywhere in terms of whether it's trends taking place in different places, things that are you always have to be looking for change. I keep talking about is like, but then what you do when you see the trends or you see the changes happening, what is signal and what is noise? What is
Mhm.
meaningful and what is not? And that's probably the hardest part in all of it. And honestly, just comes with a lot of experience to start to see, is this something that is just going to be a flash in the pan? Or is this something that if it continues to change, could impact the business that I'm in or provide a real big opportunity? And then when you start to see those, recognize, because a lot of times change can be scary and hard. Again, it's the old innovator's dilemma, right? you got to have the courage to recognize it and turn that change into an opportunity that you can go and grasp versus the fear of what might do to your current business if you have a current business. Now, if you're like a small startup coming into a space for the first time, you have no fear. Because, well, you have some fear because it could fail, but you don't have a legacy business that you're trying to protect. But once you're in there and you have to innovate beyond that, you're like, well, what's changing around me? Is this putting my business model under pressure? What does that mean? And have that ability to pivot and the courage to know when you need to make those moves and make those changes.
Yeah. And I think business model shift has been so tremendous. I mean, never in a million years did I think I would buy my mushroom coffee on subscription from an ad I saw on TikTok, right?
Exactly.
And yet it's become I I gave up my Starbucks in favor of some mushroom coffee, right? Who'd have thunk?
I know exactly. Exactly. And then there's the question. Are you going to stick with that mushroom coffee or are you for how long? Are you going to go back to something else? This is where like constantly staying on top and looking to say, am I going to be disrupted somewhere and how do I go do that? Is I think that's to me that becomes the hardest part in innovation. But at the same time, if you're not always pushing, I believe honestly, like if all of your innovations work, you're probably not pushing hard enough.
You're playing it safe.
Yeah, you're playing it safe. And that's probably especially you've got to learn how to manage when things don't go completely as planned. Either within when your innovation first gets out there, can I pivot and change or just call it and say, yep, we weren't right on that one. And sometimes your timing's just wrong. That can happen too.
And sometimes your story's wrong.
Exactly, exactly. And call it for what it is, get out of it, and figure out where you're going to go next to make up for that. Eventually, you want to have enough of a portfolio that your wins are bigger than your losses, so that net you're ahead.
Is there a non-confection organization that you look at as this kind of beacon of innovation in the food industry? Or
Oh gosh, I guess when I look at food right now, I'm really impressed in watching all the new innovators that are coming in that are not traditional food players and are coming in with they're looking and it could be everything from your alternative meat providers like a Beyond Meat or an Impossible Foods. It could be people who are trying to bring more of a better for you focus to different categories in different ways. And they're recognizing opportunities and they're finding technical and go-to-market solutions to change categories, to really try to change consumers' behavior. You still see a high failure rate over the long run because, again, consumers can be fickle. They can love you this year and not love you the next year, or one little thing goes wrong. So there's the challenge behind it. But I'm just impressed by the courage and the bravery that you see in this space. And it's something that I think you see with some of the projects that I talked about now at Hershey, we're trying to emulate that, but from within inside a larger food manufacturer.
yeah, I'm completely blown away that we haven't been milking nuts for the history of all of human history. Who knew that you could milk a nut? But there are
Yeah.
more kinds of milks on the shelf than I ever thought possible. Who knew that the Greek invasion of yogurt would be a game changer
Yeah.
for so many of us, right?
Yeah, it's where this is where the whole idea of failing fast comes in,
Mm.
because in some of these areas you really you can test things to the nth degree and you still really don't know that it's going to work. The final test is putting it on the store shelf and asking the consumer to hand over their hard-earned income to pay for it. That is when you're put either on the shelf or on the physical shelf or the digital shelf or in TikTok shop or wherever, amongst every other place where the consumer could spend their money. That is the ultimate test. And all your pre-testing will help guide you to that, but it's never going to give you a point of certainty that it's going to work.
And on that note, I'm going to leave it there because God, isn't that the thing we all crave as innovators is some level of certainty.
It is.
But it's the excitement that we don't have it that makes us come back to work every day, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you the 3 questions I ask everyone who comes on the show.
Mhm.
Number 1, what is the greatest innovation of all time?
Goodness. I'm going to go back and say, I'm going to go back a long way and say like moving type that created the
Yes.
book.
Gutenberg
That's
and the
sort of
printing
it. Yeah,
press.
exactly. Gutenberg Bible, all that kind of stuff. And people are saying that the internet was sort of the next version of that. But what they did to expand knowledge at that period in time and how that affected the world and changed the trajectory of the world. I mean, the ultimate innovations changed the scope of human history.
That's right.
And that was one of the things that did that.
Okay, we're here to dispel the myth of the one person innovation genius. What is, if you could join any innovation team in the course of human history, which team would you have liked to have been on to see something amazing come to fruition?
Well, it's funny because you talk about the software engineers and everything. I have loved computers, anything tech for a long period of time, soaked all of that up. So to have gone in and been a part of the beginning of a Microsoft or an Apple when they were just creating their first products, I think would have been a very fascinating journey to be on and follow that all the way through.
Okay, and my last question is, what's something that you wish someone would innovate because it either pisses you off or you wish there were more of it so that more people could get all this goodness?
Oh my gosh. That's a great question. I would probably say if I'm not gonna go into any particular area, but I would say the thing that pisses me off the most in any area where things are more complicated than they need to be.
Mm,
And whether that's building your IKEA furniture, a I had this personal experience. We had a microwave that had way too many features on it. I just need you to cook my food. And like the little touchpad quit working that had all the fancy gizmos quit working. So
oh,
it was microwaving just fine. It was that other part, like all the touch screens on our cars today. I'm like, I would love to go back to a knob that turns things. So those are the kind of things that piss me off, I think, is when we overcomplicate things with features that don't really add value to the consumer. That's probably so get more of a general answer than a specific one.
yes, yeah, a return to simplicity, which is why
Yeah,
we all love the iPhone, right? Which is
exactly.
why we love
Exactly.
furniture and things like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Uh, well, Charlie, this has been such an amazing conversation. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Probably the best way would be to reach out on LinkedIn, but I'll try to sort through everything that comes through from that standpoint, but that's probably going to be the easiest way.
Fantastic. Charlie, thank you so much for joining us and for all the sweetness and goodness that comes with Hershey's. Thanks so much for today.
Oh, thank you so much, Susan. This has been a blast.